Hi, this is Michael Shevack, and welcome to Godsearch. Here, you're going to learn how to have the experience called God. The experience called God. We're not going to debate God. We're not going to say yes, no, is he not? Does he do this? Why does this? We'll discuss these things. But the important thing is all of these discussions are going to be there for one purpose and one purpose only, for you to experience good in your life, to experience good. Contract that word, you get the word God, concentrated goodness. And you can have that in your life, but you have to learn how to operate according to the way life works for good, the way life works for, meaning to achieve, good. Now, we already talked for the past 6 lessons, we were going through what I call value priorities. These are basic guidelines. When you act, when you think, when you speak, even when you feel, on how you should be, so that when you act and you use your power of choice, your power of election, your supernatural ability to be technological and reshape earthly nature, the earth, birds, bees, and trees for human desires. That when you do these with these value priorities in mind, you get results that are better because they are more aligned to the way this world is designed for good. And in other words, follow basically the value priorities. It's not rigid, they're just loose guidelines. There's nuances and artistry to it. You have to learn how to do it and live it. But if you follow these basic guidelines, you will get better results from whatever you do. You will get more and more good, which is the experience called God. The experience called God. Okay. And so let's just quickly go over the value priorities since we finished all 6 of them. The first one was health. Number one, if you don't have health after you have life, forget it. Life's going to be pretty miserable. The next thing is peace. Very undervalued. People go to war gratuitously, unthinkingly, for all sorts of, ridiculous reasons. They upset their peace, they upset the planet, they upset their societies. Whether you realize it or not, you internalize it, you even breed in these human created disasters. We now have this thing we understand called epigenetics. When you create catastrophes, they are actually alter the genetic structure of the human being. you know so there's health, there's peace, there's freedom. You got to have freedom. You can't experiment with life. You can't understand what it means to be a creative person who is made in the image and likeness of God unless you understand creativity. So you have to have freedom. And you take those things, you have to execute health, peace, freedom in a way that has wisdom. Wisdom requires care. You just don't make a decision. You have to care. Care for people, care for birds, care for trees, care for the appearances of things. How do they look? Are they pleasing? Do they elevate people? What is joy? What is the music like? Okay, what are we teaching when we do films or when we create TV shows? These are all part of wisdom where we care. And we care about truth, which is that which sets us free. And we also strike in wisdom a balance between care and truth, seeking the truth, but caring about people, but not sacrificing truth. It's a very difficult balance, but that's why it's wisdom. It's a completely different thing than knowledge and understanding. It's a faculty that needs to be learned. It's an advanced faculty. So we have health, peace, freedom, wisdom, all of which is designed to release from you your full potential as a person, your full potential for the society, your full potential for economics, your full potential for education, your full potential for how automobiles should operate, the full potential for your clothing to keep you warm and keep you looking beautiful, your full potential for a date on a Saturday night. Everything should seek its fullest potential. By the way, it's the American way. And after seeking your full potential, health, peace, freedom, wisdom, your full potential, seek prosperity in all ways. Beautiful trees, beautiful air, beautiful environment. That's all prosperity, including the incredible gift of the symbolic measure of human bartering and human effort, which we call money. A powerful tool for spiritual transformation, money, if it's used correctly. It is a powerful tool for transformation in general, including misery, if it's used incorrectly. What value priorities are about is teaching everyone to act correctly. As we've spoken about it earlier, correctly comes from the Latin codegere, which means to govern together. How do we govern together with other people? How do other people govern together with us? How do we do that in society? How do we do this? If we don't know how to do this, our democracy is going to fail. It's going to fail. We're going to continue this obscene war between red and blue and blue and red and red and blue and blue and red. And this whole thing is going to get even more obscene because we are not thinking with health, peace, freedom, wisdom. Oh, wisdom. Boy, is that missing. Seeking the full potential of everything, okay? And prosperity, all of which come in successive orders because the first ones are more important than the second more important than the third more important than the fourth more important than the fifth, and the fifth more important than the sixth, and everything else is a nuance. It's a nuance. It's not a rigid rule. Anyone who's ever lost an income and has discovered the difficulties will tell you they can get by eating a small meal and it lasts them a bunch of hours. But if they don't have gasoline for their car because of the way our society is organized, they can't get work, they can't get anywhere. So gasoline gets priority over food, which is astonishing considering food is much higher on the value priority scale because it's related to health. So there's nuancing here. We're not going to learn it all at once. There is no way that I can teach it to you out of context to actually your everyday life. Okay. But nonetheless, these are basic value priorities, which if we all could pay attention to, we would accomplish something. Now, value priorities are the same whether you are the president of the United States or whether you work in the cafeteria or whether you work in the library or you panhandle on the street for a living. That's a job. You go to work, every day with your plate to receive remuneration. That's your job. I'm not faulting people who do that. These value priorities are all part of everyone's life on every scale of our civilization. They're the same value priorities that the Congress needs. It's the same value priorities that your personal family needs. It's the same value priorities as, your summer camps. It's the same value priorities in industries. These value priorities are human. They are spiritually designed into how life works for good, meaning how to have an experience of God. So it's important to get to know them. Feel free to look at the website, yourgodsearch.com, and in the publications page, you'll see the Six Fix Spiritual Health Care for a Stronger America. It contains it all in there. So now, because these lines, these value priorities are built into the design of life, you can use them very creatively. You can use them in advance for making the decision. You can say, okay, is this healthy at the same time as you will make prosperity. Okay. Do I release my full potential in a way that's balanced? Because a lot of people try to release their full potential and they overwork and overwork and overwork and overwork other people and get all sorts of manic about it. And then they lose their health or they lose relationships, which we're going to talk about next. You see, you can use these value priorities to help think through what you want to accomplish so you get really good results. But conversely, putting the cart before the horse or the horse before the cart. You can also take a look at something that has taken place that's good or something that has taken place that is not as good. One where you have more of an experience of God and one where you have less of an experience of God or good. And you can analyze what went wrong. And you can take a look and you will see when things do not take place that value priorities were not in their correct place. Right? So you can use this as a kind of diagnostic for, is it a good decision or was it a good decision? That's how deep and core value priorities are. By the way, they are the key to how we can save the US from what it's going through right now. And I really humbly, because I suffered greatly to make it this simple. They are the key to how we have to manage the world so that we can have a really beautiful world for everyone, including my children. I have three, and other people's children, because you will discuss future generations are really critical. So value priorities are something that are really worth thinking about and studying. Go back, please go back 6 podcasts and re-listen to them if you've forgotten what they are. Okay, go back and do that. All right. But it's extremely important that you apply them and also look backwards if something is not as good as it could be, so you can learn value priorities, let them become instinctual. It's like tying a shoelace. You tie a shoelace, you're struggling with, which string goes where and all that kind of stuff. Eventually, you tie the shoelace, it becomes easy, then it becomes automatic. And really, what's happening is neurologically, nerve pathways are opening up in your body. So your body chemistry is actually accommodating the action of tying a shoelace. So it's automatic and easy. This is how we do everything in life. All right. Everything that we say we're thinking is also being accommodated by our body. We live in a unity. Unity is one of the qualities of the God experience. We talked about that in, I think, podcast 1 or 2. So, it's like tying a shoelace. The more you practice thinking about value priorities and apply them, the more you take a look at what has happened and study what has happened in your life to see that you have not applied the value priorities correctly, the more you learn value priorities, the more you learn it. How I learned it. I was at that time in my life a madman in advertising, believe it or not. It was 35 years ago. I became a rabbi. But prior to that, I was a madman. I've done a lot of famous commercials. I did Gillette, the best a man can get. It's still running, which is utterly amazing to me. And I've done some Apple computer commercials that won all sorts of, awards. And I remember pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing really hard during pitches. And I remember feeling this burning in my stomach, and I didn't know what it was. I thought it was the soda I was drinking. And I didn't know. And years later, I realized that I had a precancerous condition called Barrett's esophagus. My father, may rest in peace, died of esophageal cancer. And well, if I look back on it, at that time, I was a young guy with a wife and 3 children, lots of expenses. I was overworking to be a good guy. I was a good guy. but I was overworking so hard for prosperity in the form of conquering in competition and conquering in terms of money and bonuses that I didn't put my health first. I put prosperity before health. And I got a precancerous condition, which, given my background, really posed a danger. This is how we discover value priorities. If you look very, very closely at things that go wrong, you can get lessons on how this world is designed. I use the word designed. Some people will debate it. God's designing it. That's theistic. Some people are more impersonal. The world evolved this way. It makes no difference. There's an order here. We discussed it. There's an order here. Okay, you can call those orders God's laws. You can call the order nature's laws. You can call the order anything you want. Okay, God's will. But there is an order here, and you must learn if you want a living spiritual experience of good or God, you must learn to align your actions with the design of this world so they are compatible. Align, as we'll talk about later on, is the Latin translation for the usual word covenant, which is the English translation of the Hebrew word brit. And we'll understand what a covenant is when we're getting to the point of alignment. This is kind of training before that, because you have to understand what the nature of human behavior is, that it can be aligned to the laws of this world, or it can be unaligned or disaligned or malaligned to the order of this world. Value priorities are key. It's a very simple way to begin the process of learning step by step how to live in this world. Hey, it's really strange. There is no owner's manual, unfortunately. There is no owner's manual. We are born, we pop out of the womb. God bless our mothers. And no one hands us an owner's manual and teaches us to be human. We learn from flawed people and we learn flawed ways. And then we have to spend a lot of our time, like I've done, unlearning what I learned in order to be happy. And I'd like to avoid that. That's the purpose of the Godsearch podcast, is let's learn it correctly and let's relearn it faster so we can have a better and more productive and a happier life. All right. Now, if value priorities were the only thing we needed to consider, it would be easy. But let's be very, very cautious here. Okay. And I want to be a little controversial. Value priority 3, which is freedom, is very different for a fetus, or a fetus who is defective, and a woman who is bearing birth. Freedom is applied differently to the mother who is threatened in childbirth than it is to a fetus. Very controversial, because freedom has to be applied differently. Freedom is applied differently to someone who is terribly psychotic, okay? And you finally get the legal right to violate their freedom and you can incarcerate them. That freedom is completely differently applied to someone who's reasonably sane and gets up, goes to work, earns a living, comes back and lives a normal life. If that's the measure of insanity, some people would think that, it's a measure of sanity. Some people would think it's the measure of insanity. But leave that subtle debate aside. Freedom is applied differently for a teenager who is 11 than the teenager is 16, than the adult who is 21, let alone the adult who is nearing death and maybe has a chronic illness and is seeking euthanasia. Freedom is a value priority, but it has to be applied with knowledge of what the relationships are. It's not the same. Prosperity for a newborn baby is a mother's breast. or some kind of suitable technological substitute. Okay. Freedom for an adult could be a steak, and a really great potato with it, and, a double martini. Um, that can be prosperity. Okay. So, you know, these value priorities all have to be applied depending on the relationships involved. Okay. And it's not always simple. Okay. There are many subtleties and complications, as I said before. But before we even get into the subtleties and the complications, let's lay out some of the relationships that are involved in applying value priorities. So I'm going to go over, and we're going to start with number one on this podcast, relationship priorities. All right. There's value priorities and relationship priorities. And let's go over the relationship priorities, but we're going to start with number one. The number one most important relationship, if you wish to have your experience of God. This is personally driven. The most important relationship is your relationship with yourself. Value priority number one is you. Put yourself first. This is American, but this is common sense. You're on the airplane. There's an oxygen deprivation in the cabin. They tell you to put the mask on yourself before you even put the mask on your kid, because if you are not saturated with oxygen, your actions are not going to be whole, and you will not have the fortitude to take care of your child. You've got to take care of yourself. If you are a man who is working hard for a living and you are breaking down, okay, and you are hurting your body so that you will eventually not live long enough to be with your family and nurture your family, okay, well, there's a problem with the value priorities. In the past, people would say, oh, that's great. You're self-sacrificing for the sake of your kids and the family and everything like that. We are not saying that here. We've gone, we've built up our material world so well, it's time to reintroduce priorities. Centuries ago, building up the world was given priorities, and we self-sacrificed a lot to do that. And that was, in many cases, very noble. In other cases, it was just greedy and dumb. But in this era, it is very important to keep yourself healthy, peaceful, free, wise, expressing your full potential, and prosperous, so that you take care of yourself and the people who are attached to you. And you don't dump it on everyone else, including community or society and everything. Our secret to big government problems is that the individual has to become a big government unto himself or herself or itself or whatever it is. Okay? You see, every individual has to take responsibility for themselves first once they become an adult. Okay? For a child, for a baby, it's different. All right, the child comes first. Every parent knows that baby screams, and it is biologically designed in you for your blood pressure to go through the roof and feed the baby. All right, that's how nature works. That baby, if you have sane parents, controls the parents, and the parents think they're in charge. But the baby gets priority. We are hardwired to protect the future generation. We'll talk about that. You come first. Now, unfortunately, because of the way religions were in the past and how they passed down knowledge, there was a tendency to elevate martyrdom. Put yourself second for the group. Put yourself second to be kind to another person. Put yourself second. Well, putting yourself second and putting yourself second, putting yourself second in that kind of martyrdom is very dangerous, because you're not taking care of yourself first. I know someone came to me for counseling one day and was very, very, very sick. And it turned out that when we talked, you know, they were putting themselves second in everything. And they were just getting weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker, because their value priorities were off base. One must be very careful about false martyrdom, false martyrdom, where you put yourself second in situations where it's not needed. If you have a newborn baby, you get up and you feed that baby. That's not false martyrdom, okay? You put yourself second because you're supposed to be put second. But a lot of people, like I did, put myself second to get a campaign in advertising to feed my family, and my stomach was rotting, and I eventually wound up with a completely ulcerated stomach and duodenum. That's false martyrdom. I'm putting myself second for the group, second for the corporation, second for the money, second for my wife and children, supposedly at the expense of destroying myself. That's false martyrdom. We all have so much fear deep inside of us that oftentimes we don't even realize that we are a false martyr. We are martyring ourselves in a situation where it is not critically important for life and death, and critically important to maintain the balance of all life and God's ways, how life works for good. We are all called upon to sacrifice, which in Latin means a sacred action, like artifice and artificial, okay, is an artificial thing created by a human being, and a sacrifice is a sacred action, like feeding a child. Even though you're bleary-eyed and cannot even move, you stop to feed the child, okay? And these sacrifices are good and they are very noble. Sometimes, in severe situations, you are called upon to make that sacrifice a martyrdom where you are willing to die for the cause. We'll talk about this down the road, but not all sacrifices, the vast majority of sacrifices or good actions, selfless actions, are not martyrdom, where you defeat yourself or you're willing to die and suffer for it. Relationship priority number one is about doing good for yourself. And with that tremendous power and strength from feeding yourself and being kind to yourself and taking care of the life that is most intimately yours, meaning your life, you then can give to other people. In a strange way, a spirituality, which is what we teach here in Godsearch, which is the foundation of correct morality, a spirituality requires you to be kind of wholly selfish, meaning selfish in a way that feeds your life, selfish in a way that strengthens you in this world to contribute. Selfishness has been a terribly maligned thing. Self-centeredness has been terribly maligned by moral teachings that are out of context. Out of context. Our context here is life. Be selfish in a way that's good and holy and contributive to your well-being. And we'll talk about value priority number two next, which is someone else. Okay? But be selfish and allow yourself to be selfish. If you do, it will give you a solid ground, for you to have a core, real, human, fleshly experience of good. Being good to yourself is the foundational first step in relationships. And without that, you cannot apply the value priorities. So health, peace, freedom, wisdom, the expression of your full potential and prosperity Apply it to yourself first, and then expand there in everything you think, do, and say. Seek good, the experience called God, health, peace, freedom, wisdom, full potential, and prosperity, and start with yourself. Enjoy your selfishness. And thank you so much for spending part of that selfishness watching Godsearch. Uncover God, discover God, and recover God if you got lost in bad teachings of religion like false martyrdom, where true martyrdom was taken out of context and it became deprivation over every single thing until you no longer were kind to yourself and you were living for other people and drowning yourself and making yourself miserable. Share this podcast with other people who are in that situation. It's much more common than anyone wants to admit. And we are forced into that thinking by governments and religions that are unspiritual and are not properly aligned to life. This is Michael Shevack. Thanks again for being here for Godsearch. If you're alive, you're already on a God search, so you might as well learn how it works. See you next time. Bye-bye.